And before I hand over to Surya Dai, there's just one other thing that we thought in the team we'd like to pick up from last week. When we have a team debrief after these weeks, and something emerged that we thought, actually, when we were talking amongst us about issues that had come up in the group, we thought, oh, it would be quite good to just clarify. One of the points from the teaching last week from Maitreya Bandhu was the bit where in his book he talks about do 3 things now. And I think part of what happened in some of the discussions were some of us thought, oh, actually, this sounds a lot like you have to get your to-do list done. Being mindful involves getting your to-do list done. And that really isn't the point that he was making. And we talked about it in the team, and we thought it would just be really good to clarify that in case there was any misunderstanding. What he was talking about was actually, if you're in that kind of spaced out, overwhelmed sort of state, actually choosing 1 or 2 things to do that are quite simple and quite practical can actually be quite grounding. And it's not about the quantity of things done, it's about the quality of attention which you pay to doing a physical task or something that's just quite simple to engage with and sort out. I mean, I could give you an example for myself from this evening. Just before supper, I had an email that sometimes it just hit a slightly funny nerve, and I sort of went, oh, and I found myself in a slightly, not quite as grounded as I could be kind of space. And actually I thought, I've got all this washing hanging out. Actually be really nice to just bring this washing in, fold it up, sort it out. And it just brought me down. So that's the kind of thing that we're getting at here. It's about earthing ourselves by mindfully completing 1 or 2 very simple tasks that we can do with our full attention. And I think a key word for me in this is that there's an aesthetic quality to that kind of attention. It's not a quantitative, get this done, get on to the next thing. It's, oh, actually, I'm going to just really feel these pegs, feel the texture of these clothes, take time, to put the socks into pairs, to fold things up, just whatever the activity is. There's a quality of mindfulness that we can use in doing these simple things that can bring us right down to earth, actually, and really help us to shift the gear in our minds. And that was the point that we were reaching towards. I'm sure if Surya Dai has got anything to add to that, but that was basically, a point that came out. So I'm going to hand over to Surya Dai now for our second week of the course, Life with Full Attention.
Great, thanks, Leela. No, nothing to add. No, beautifully explained, but very interesting. How doing the course and then actually doing the groups, what arises in the groups is actually very, very informative and helpful. It's a very much a sort of cooperative thing, which is what is so enjoyable about it. Anyway, welcome back. And this week we're on to body, but before we do that, I'll just tell you I've had a very interesting week after starting off with mastery last week. Mastery being, you'll remember, the need to cultivate the sense that we are to some extent in control of the small things or the more minor things in our lives, so that we might be able to focus much more on the biggest things, because the small things are kind of sorted out. And that week culminated in today when I sat down to write the talk. And this morning I noticed really, really clearly, having kind of followed it all week, that before I could actually sit down and formulate what I wanted to say, I actually needed to do stuff, like I needed to make the beds and tidy the kitchen, do a load of washing, make some phone calls, and have a couple of coffees and build a wall and clean the drains. No, that's just a joke. And most interesting was noticing that while I was doing that stuff, stuff was actually going over and over in my head, but quite clearly about what I needed to say. It was really quite soothing. And finally, when I finally sat down to write at about midday, I just felt very ordered, very ready, and very focused. It was just a nice sort of personal experience of how that sort of mastery thing can work. The preparation for an activity being very important. Anyway, one of the reasons I really wanted to help lead this course with the other guys was because I myself wanted to get down and get detailed and practical into the foundations of mindfulness. And these spheres of mindfulness, including body and feelings and mind, are found in a very ancient text called the Satipatthana Sutra. A text of central importance in Buddhism, undoubtedly. And the Satipatthana is a systematic guide to developing full attention, teaching us how to be mindful, and how mindfulness really can lead to insight into the nature of reality and the way things really are. That phrase that you keep hearing again and again and again, how things really are. How things really are, as opposed to how we filter them and skew them through our limited sense perceptions and through our mind perspectives. You know, we don't live deep in the knowledge that everything is impermanent. We have to keep reminding ourselves that everything is impermanent, but that is this sort of fundamental truth. We go back to it again and again and again, and it sinks down and begins to sort of bite. And our sense of reality begins to shift. They're sort of like seismic motions in our consciousness. And very interestingly, the first of these foundations is the body. It's not the head, which is arguably where most of us live these days, especially now that we don't have to work outside and fetch our own water, but are many of us mostly glued to a computer screen for big chunks of the day. We go to the gym to exercise instead of to the fields or to chop wood. And the head is constantly ruminating and rationalizing and sorting and classifying and remembering, imagining, analyzing, reanalyzing, reimagining. Basically, you know, our heads, our great big heads on these bodies that we've often largely forgotten, are proliferating. And in Buddhism, there's a word for it. It's papancha. And papancha is that endless fountain of thought that spews out wave after wave after wave and sort of feeds on itself and proliferates on itself, mostly while we're awake. And all of us who have sat down to meditate or to learn to meditate will have had the experience of gradually realizing, or maybe even suddenly, oh, look, I am really largely not in control of this stuff at all. It just bubbles up. Things, thoughts, images, ideas, memories, they just pop up out of nowhere. We're only in control of our thoughts to a very limited extent. So, why the body first and foremost? Well, it's because the body is the bedrock of our attention. The body is where we actually experience everything. We can kind of think that it's our heads, but it's not. It's actually the body where everything first registers. The body is our home. And developing awareness of the body and its movements will make us feel more fully alive and can be a very strong antidote to the stresses and anxieties that are invariably generated in the head, very often as a result of this papancha that goes on. We tend in our society, our culture, to think of the body as separate from the mind. I remember a teacher of mine many years ago when I was talking about an experience of physical illness saying, Sally, you talk about your body as if it was a horse that you were riding. And it was such a shock to make sense of what he was saying and to begin to realize how alienated I was from my body, talking about it as a sort of a separate object that was punishing me in some way or causing difficulties. It was a great surprise, this sort of realization of alienation, of separateness. So personally, I could talk for a very long time about how over the 25 or so ensuing years, I've become more and more and more convinced that when my body manifests things like pain or fatigue or malaise, or when it delivers pleasure or energy or a sense of well-being, it is actually telling me something, and I need to listen. I can't say I've ever been somebody who was actually fairly happy in their skin. I hope, I trust that many of you are. But my image of myself has always been of someone who was a bit dumpy, not athletic, you know, not a physical type at all. They used to call me thunder thighs at school and, you know, laugh when I kind of went into the gym. And I wasn't somebody who could do sport kind of thing. And I've never, ever been one of those people who gets the endorphin rush that they talk about when they exercise. I just kind of labour through it, dreaming of the half pint at the end of it. I have learned, though, finally, and with much more care, much more attention to taking care of myself, to appreciate and think much more kindly about my body. And I reflect that it's seen me through such a lot. It's something that I'd like us all to do later, perhaps. So my body has recovered from a bad car accident. It's been through several rather nasty tropical diseases when I lived in Africa. It's survived the difficult birth of a daughter, midlife crises and meltdowns, which come, as those of us who've had them know, with hundreds of attendant physical symptoms. And now I'm into old age, I'm 65, and still it gets sick. And I think, oh, this hip pain or this tinnitus is going to last forever. And then it gets better. And then something else comes. But I have learned along the way to love and appreciate the way it will always try to recover. I fell off my bike last week and badly grazed both my knees, just like being, you know, 8 years old again. Really funny. It's big grazes on my knees. You know? And it's been really just brought back memories of watching those scabs forming, you know, and it healing over. But literally, almost hourly, morning to afternoon, seeing the difference, looking at your body recovering itself. I mean, I know, of course, that recovery will not always happen. This is something I want and wish to take on as a Buddhist. So I try to appreciate much more. I've got Buddhist friends with very varying physical problems, ranging right through from quite mildly lifestyle affecting to very, very severe. And I marvel at the ways in which they've used the Buddha's teachings to meet the enormous challenges that face them, most particularly mindfulness. I marvel that though they're often in great pain, they can yet be so incredibly light and free and relaxed in their faces. And I sort of think, oh, this stuff really works. In fact, I was with one of them recently. She's actually 52 and quite severely disabled, and I'm 65. And we were walking up to her front door when her neighbour came round the corner and said, "Hello, Amaladeepa. Oh, and this must be your mother." I just wanted to curl up and die, you know. I'm only 13 years older than her. But she's got this incredible face that is just, I don't know, it's just sort of wrinkle free. How does she do that? Mindfulness. So this is a bit of a digression, I'm aware, but I want us a little later to just take some time, both now and in the week, to reflect a little bit about what our relationship is with our body, because all of us will be different. Some of us will have chronic illnesses, some of us will be fit as fleas. But then how embodied, how much do we live in and from our bodies? How much do we trust and like them? And these are perhaps some questions for later in our groups. Okay. Anyway, the next thing that we're going to do is quite a long bit of practice, for which I'm going to ask you to make yourselves comfortable, preferably lie down, get out of the camera shot and make yourselves comfy on the floor, but just move your machines around so that you can hear me clearly. Just taking a little time to set yourselves up to be as relaxed and comfortable for about 20-25 minutes as you can. That's great. And what we're going to do is bring our attention right into our bodies. Taking time to consider as we do this that our bodies are really the only thing we fully know from the inside. Like everything else in the world, our bodies are in a way objects, but the way we know them is not like the way we know a chair or a television or a car as a separate objects, because we actually inhabit our bodies. And Maitreya Bandhu concludes this section in the book, for those of you who haven't read it, by saying, quote, "If we want to discover what life means, then we have to pay attention to the part of the universe that we know from the inside." So we're going to spend a nice chunk of time now going inside, and I'm going to lead us in quite a lot of detail. So lying down and preferably bending your knees up, and perhaps support your head with a pillow or a cushion. Bending your knees stops you falling asleep and also eases the back, as you know. And put your arms either palm up by your sides or resting lightly on your hips or your tummy. And bringing attention gently to the breath, long out breaths. Long out breaths, letting go of the past, what's happened recently or more distantly, and letting go of the future and worries, and just allowing ourselves to really revel in this opportunity, which we're sharing with many of our friends across the city, across the country. So becoming aware now of all the points of contact between your body and the floor or the chair on which you're sitting, and allowing them to fully take your weight. Letting go right down into the floor. Letting the awareness sink deeper, even below the floor, through the foundations, imagining the ground below, being comforted by the fact that the planet can hold us. Whatever we're doing or wherever we are, the planet will hold us. And if the mind wanders, just notice and then gently bring it back. And each time you do this, it's a moment of awareness. And do this with a quality of kindness, non-judgmental. Ah, happened again. Back we come. Now bring gentle, light awareness to the body, just scanning through and noticing what's going on, and allowing the breath to course through the torso and the limbs, following it deep into the body, and noticing the breath just breathing itself, allowing it to do exactly what it wants to do, not trying to control it in any way, allowing the belly to rise and fall. And now as I lead us through the body scan, at each place I name, just allow the attention to rest there and simply notice the sensations. Simply allowing them to be what they are. Noticing heat or cool, tightness or looseness, softness, tension, tingling, aching. And starting now with the face. Allow the attention to rest in all sensations in your face. That's my bird clock. Enjoy the sounds of the bird clock. And then noticing the broad expanse of the forehead. Wide. And any frowning or holding there. And releasing that on the out breath. Smoothing out the eyebrows. Allowing, imagining a sense of space between the eyebrows. Relaxing the eyes in their sockets. The cheeks. The teeth. And then the jaw. And often tension around the jaw. Just letting go on the out breath. Release the jaw. The tongue is soft. It's resting on the palate, perhaps. Letting go on the out breath. Bringing awareness with the in breath. And now the throat and the neck. front and back. Explore all the sensations here. Are there any aches or pains? Is there any tension? Is it tight or loose, soft? The throat, imagining the throat, seeing the throat in your mind's eye. And let it be quiet. Let the throat, which is so full of words, just be full of silence and space. Now down to the base of the skull, to the point where the neck meets the skull. And the big, strong muscles that work so hard to support our head. Give me lots of tension here. Breathe into the neck and let it be free. Imagine your fist opening gently beneath this area to cradle your skull. Always releasing and letting go on the out breath, bringing awareness with the in breath. And now bring the attention down the back of the neck and on downwards through the spine. Again, resting awareness in the big muscles that run up either side of the spine. That complicated, beautiful network of interconnected vertebrae supported by ligaments and tendons and muscles. And bring an intention to release here. And again, allowing the tension to drain down into the earth. Let the vertebrae unlock and separate, sensing the space between them. Enjoying the earth supporting you. And now notice the whole of the upper back and how it moves with the breath. How the ribs rise and fall and the shoulders flatten. Not forcing, not holding. Just releasing into the wideness, the breadth, the depth of what your body wants to do. And next, moving down to the middle back, to the area below the rib cage. So this area has to do a lot of work holding us up, a lot of strong muscles here. So take a moment to relax and release and notice what's going on in this middle part of the spine. And then further down to the lower back, to the broad expanse of bone and muscle, the ligaments and tendons, the fan of the sacrum. The softness of the hips, the buttocks, and holding any areas of pain or tension here with kindness and with appreciation for all the work that your body does. Now again, through the buttocks, ensuring that they are relaxed and not holding. And then broadening the awareness to the whole of the spine and the back. Noticing how the spine is being rocked and cradled by the breath. And just coming back up to the shoulders for a moment and allowing the arms, the weight of the arms to fall away from the shoulder joints. Letting the weight of the arm create the release. And then allowing the lower arms to release from the elbows, the hands to release from the wrists, and the fingers to release out of the hands. And taking a good moment to notice any sensations in the hands. Often quite a lot going on here. And next, bring awareness to your belly, to your tummy area, rising with the breath and falling with the out breath. And just watching this for a moment. And going down into the pelvis, which is broad and soft. And just resting our awareness here for a moment. Looking for a sense of space, ease. And again, if you're feeling tension bunching anywhere, just take your attention to that area and just breathe into it. Releasing on the out breath. And now from the pelvis, let the weight of the legs fall away from the hips and take your attention down through the big muscles of the thighs, front and back. Some of the most powerful muscles in the body. Imagine the muscles falling away from the bone, relaxing. And let the weight of the lower legs, the calves, fall away from the knees. And then the weight of the feet falling away from the ankles. Again, looking for a sense of space in the joints, the knees, and the ankles. And explore the sensations of the feet. Like the hands, lots going on, but not always uppermost in our consciousness. And at the top of the feet and the soles. through the toes, working through from the big toe to the little one. Imagine breathing right down into your toes. Noticing any sensations of cool or warmth, tingling, tightness, stretch. And now broadening out the awareness to include the whole body, lying on the floor or resting on the chair. The whole body, whatever is happening, no judgment, no interference, just noticing and acceptance. Letting any thoughts that bubble up just float away and bringing the attention back to the whole body. And now noticing that the breath is constantly changing, never the same. And the sensations in the body too. Something that you noticed in one place, is it still there? Again, constantly changing, nothing is fixed. And just resting for a moment in this flow of change manifesting through the body. Resting in this moment, and now this moment, and now this moment. And now we'll begin to draw the meditation to a close. Take some deep breaths and come back again into the room. Noticing any sounds, sights, smells, or textures. Gently bringing yourself back and resuming your seat. Several people still asleep. Hello. Okay, great. Nice doing that together. So a little more chat before we have a leg stretch and then go into groups. So one of the things that I hope that you may have noticed in that scan is if and where you hold tension, and similarly, where you experience ease and everything in between. Because with mindfulness, we learn to notice that we are hunching with our shoulders or holding tension in the abdomen, and bringing awareness to those areas will begin to release them. And over time, we can develop an attitude, and then that can become a habit. I mean, an example for me, these classic holding patterns that are just so deeply fixed in us. I often notice when I'm driving that, you know, I'm halfway down the M25 and my shoulders are kind of up around my ears, and I bring attention to them and release them, drop the shoulder blades. And when I go back, 2 minutes later, they'll be in exactly the same position. It's just, you know, that's an absolute classic for me. And it just reinforces this fact that these deep holding patterns are very strongly held. And if we don't, it needs work. It needs work, and it needs attention. But if it becomes a habit, then, you know, it can change. We'll begin to understand as we watch our minds too, that letting go of tension is just as much about working with the mind as with the body. But we can start with the body. The body affects the mind, and the mind affects the body. The two things are just... So in time, we maybe learn to notice more when we're stressed, for example, to look for mind and body symptoms like tension in the shoulders, or irritability, or frustration, or slightly nauseous feeling. And if we can catch it early, then we might be able to do something about it. Stop, get in the gap, take a moment to notice the body, stretch, move, breathe in and out, long breaths. It's not rocket science, is it? The out breaths, Maitre Bandhu suggests extending them for a long time until they completely empty out the stale air right at the bottom of our lungs. You know, putting the lips together in a fine blowing motion. And as our practice of meditation deepens, then hopefully we'll begin to perceive less and less of a divide between these two things, between the body and the mind. I mean, with regard to tension, I've learned that when my body is holding a lot of tension, like, for example, if I'm having a disagreement with somebody, or if I'm silently feeling irritated by someone or something, or if I want this meeting to end and get off and watch TV, then it's invariably because there's actually a whole lot of meing going on, you know, and I do get hunched and frown, hold the belly, feel like I'm about to be pounced on. It's like I've got to defend this me, protect this kind of precious self, kind of assert it and proclaim it, tighten round it. The more selfing there is, the more tension there is. Vidya Mala, who of course teaches mindfulness and has been the founder of Breathworks, her watchword is, at any one moment, take a look. Are you in a state of contraction or expansion? In contraction, there will be tension. In expansion, there will be creativity. I think it's a good one, a really, really good one to come back to. The more self there is, the more tension there is. As soon as we get into this selfing project, my needs, my strong opinions, my views, all the things that define this big illusion of a separate, permanent me that needs to be defended and asserted, the more we notice that when we relax, we just let go, then it's gone. Notice what happens, for example, after you apologize, or you admit that you're wrong, or simply let go of having things your way or getting what you want. It seems like quite a hump to go over to make that apology, and yet immediately afterwards there is this letting go. And I think it also happens when we laugh. That's the feeling of letting go. Get to know that feeling that happens when we laugh spontaneously. Laughter is such a strong way of releasing and relaxing the self, and immediately creates connection and restores balance. You know, there's that wonderful saying, isn't there? Laughter is the shortest distance between two people. I so believe that. But it's the feeling in the body that laughter creates, that wonderful sort of healing energy that perhaps we don't give it quite as much attention or credit for its power as it deserves. Anyway, just a couple more things to say before I finish very soon. Maitreya Bandhu advocates a good health audit, getting the basics right, of course, in terms of body care, really taking on board if we're sleeping enough, exercising enough, eating well enough. It's all a very important part of it. And a final suggestion this evening is for something to take forward into our week. And this is the mindful walk, doing a mindful walk, a short mindful walk each day. Now, there are detailed instructions in the book, and I'm not going to go into a great deal of detail with it here. And again, it's not rocket science. Basically, you choose a route and a place that's familiar. You imagine the route in your mind's eye before you go. You always go the same way, only 15, 20 minutes, no more. But doing your route, maybe it's a familiar walk to the supermarket or the bus stop or something that you do regularly anyway, but resolving to be mindful on your walk, to notice how things change each time you do the route, how the seasons change, how the weather has changed, the different presences. Peg out some landmarks or markers, and then as you walk, bring the attention into the body in a way very similar to what we've just done with the body scan, noticing movement, flexion, weight, tension, release. And you can, if you want to, maybe just chant, walking mindfully, walking peacefully. And again, imagining the depths of the earth beneath your feet and noticing all the bones and the joints and the angles of the foot as you lift and then lower it. And then resolving to really notice and just take pleasure in what your senses perceive, in the colours, the shapes, the sounds. Basically putting into practice something of what we've been learning. A mindful walking meditation. Or the body scan, or both. And then hopefully extending that out to bringing mindfulness to all our movements whenever we're reaching for something off a shelf or bending, running, opening doors, rising, sitting. Anyway, if you have any more questions about the walk, then you can ask them in your groups.